Alright, y'all. So today, wanted to do a very quick review of the 12th studio album from the Beach Boys, Smiley Smile. This album was released in September of 1967. So, going into this review for this album, I wanted to kind of sit with this album a little bit, and I gave it a significant amount of re listens. And my opinion of it has kind of been changed over a while. Now, I will say that this album is still pretty controversial. Carl Wilson famously regarded this album as more of a bunt than a grand slam, so he was kind of dissing the album a little bit there. But that being said, I'm going to go quickly into this review, give you my thoughts on this album, the pros, the cons, my overall opinions. Now, I can't really review this album necessarily without mentioning the history behind it, because if you listen to Pet Sounds and then you immediately jump into this album, it's like night and day. The differences in style, the production quality of the songs, it's just extremely different here. And, why does everything sound so lo-fi, if not unfinished, and just weird as hell? Like, the best way I can describe this album to someone is it's very chill, it's lo-fi, and it's also just weird. Like, it's just a weird album, and I really can't tell you if it's like the Beach Boys' weirdest album. I think there's an argument to be made there for that. But starting out with the history, after the pretty huge critical success that Pet Sounds was, and the huge, crazy instrumentation and production, and the way that the songs are becoming more sophisticated, Brian Wilson, the leader of the Beach Boys, was working on another album called Smile, which was continuing along the similar path with kind of like bigger production styles, with that modular approach, more sophisticated songs and arrangements. And, all culmination of this included the efforts of Good Vibrations, which came out in the end of 66, and, was a huge success. It was number one around the world. People loved it. It was a very sophisticated song. Apparently, it shocked George Martin of the Beatles, so that's a pretty huge compliment in my opinion. And Brian Wilson was continuing along a similar path for Smile. Now, many things led to Smile collapsing. Brian Wilson kind of had a mental breakdown. He was exhausted. There was pushback from the label, band members, the sophistication and the complex nature of the songs, and also issues with the lyricist Van Dyke Parks. And eventually, Brian just kind of gave up on the album for a variety of reasons. I mean, he kind of felt like it was too crazy experimental music, which I think that quote in hindsight, especially with this album, is pretty funny, because eventually, after Smile got officially announced to be canceled, which I believe was in May of 67, the band was actually supposed to be playing at another huge countercultural movement and event that happened in the 60s. That was the Monterey Pop Festival, which, if you know anything about music in the 60s, you've probably heard of this festival. I mean, Jimi Hendrix played there, and it was famous. And at some point, the Beach Boys were supposed to be headlining that show, but they dropped out, and there was just a lot of really, to be honest with you, a complete fold by the band creatively, right? I mean, Brian Wilson had given up completely on Smile. He had a mental collapse. He eventually started tinkering with Heroes and Villains. It was released in July of 67. And that song, was complex. It was interesting, but just completely made no waves, right? It wasn't anywhere the success of Good Vibrations, and it just completely deflated Brian. Now, the issue came, Smile was dead. The band members were kind of seen as sort of, these guys in striped shirts. They weren't really with the counterculture or really the trends in music that were happening at that time. They were just kind of seen as backwards, if you will. And it was just like a complete admission of defeat by the band overall. So another issue came when Capitol Records, they were still demanding a new record to be released, and Smile had collapsed by this point. So Brian Wilson, kind of in a compromise, decided to abandon the studio techniques and hiring studio musicians and just built a home studio inside his home mansion and got the band members together and used 8-track machines, and the band members basically played all the instruments on this album. And Brian Wilson said there's some like famous quotes, but he's like, I can't do Smile, I'm gonna do a homespun version of it, we're gonna do our vocals in this homemade studio, and I'm gonna be singing in the pool or something along those lines. And this album definitely sounds like that. In roughly about 5 to 6 weeks, all the band members came together. They recorded in Brian Wilson's home studio, which had that weird like Adam West Batman thing where like they would have to slide a bookcase as a door. No joke, it was actually a real thing he had built into his home. I mean, hey, if you got the money, you got the money. And they made a homespun version of Smile, essentially, alongside some other tracks. And eventually came out Smiley Smile. And this album is just, it's really weird. It's a weird record to just like talk about and describe. I want to kind of briefly touch upon the album cover, because the album cover is just like this crazy like cabin in the woods. It's just like infested with greenery and trees and vegetation. There's some animals on it, like there's an elephant and a giraffe. I mean, the elephant looks high as hell, and it just looks like it stinks of marijuana, right? It looks very trippy, and I mean, something obviously from the 60s. And I guess it's the best way to describe Brian Wilson's mindset, I guess, at this time. He didn't really want to do crazy production techniques in the studio. He wanted to do a much more simpler album, which in a lot of ways, if you look at it, is kind of groundbreaking, since a lot of bands at this time were not doing this. Now, I'm going to go into a track-by-track thoughts like I always do with these videos, and just to give you my general opinions. The first track is Heroes and Villains, and it's a slightly shortened version of the Smile Sessions one. It was basically, I think, the one that was released as a single. And like I said, this album is very uneven in nature, because they kind of threw some of the high-produced and high arrangements in terms of complexity songs on the album mixed with these super simple lo-fi records that have tons of audible mistakes and just are a completely different vibe. And Heroes and Villains, I already mentioned this in my Smile Sessions review, but it's a great song. And it was obviously supposed to be on Smile, but it ended up being on this album. And I mean, it's a great song. I have no complaints. I just prefer the longer version. Next, we have Vegetables. Now, this song is really quite strange on the album, because it was a song, once again, from Smile that got pulled into this record. And it's like half of this lo-fi version where the band members are chewing, I'm assuming they're chewing vegetables or singing their vocals on the song with some very lo-fi production in the background. And then at the midpoint of the song, it switches to the Smile Sessions version, which is the highly produced and arranged version. It's really quite strange. I don't really know how to describe it. It's the oddest, like one of the oddest tracks on the album. If I had to like compare it to the Smile Sessions, I really prefer the Smile Sessions version. Now, there are certain versions of Smile tracks here that have, grown on me. And I obviously am not going to try to review this album with a bit of bias just because I really enjoyed Smile. But, like I said, it's a very strange track. Then we have Fall Breaks and Back to Winter, W. Woodpecker's Sympathy. This is just a complete instrumental track. This is basically Fire from the Smile Sessions. And it's a completely different vibe. It's completely re-recorded, and it's honestly much more chill and calm. Fire is a very manic and crazy track on the Smile Sessions, and honestly, I don't mind this version. Maybe Brian could have added some vocals to it, but I mean, it's pretty good, honestly. Like, I don't mind a stripped-down version of it. This whole album is like the elephant on this album cover, right? He's chill. He's having a good time with this record. The fourth one is She's Going Bald. Now, half of this track is the musical fragment from the Smile Sessions. I think it was called He's Doing Speeches, I believe, if I'm saying that correctly. It's half of that, and then half of just I don't know, a little bit of nonsense. It's a weird track. I like the first half of it because it's based on the Smile sessions, and that had some huge promise, and it kind of abruptly cuts. Like, you can actually hear in the song itself the edit. It just, like I said, there's some weird mistakes on this album, but it's got a chill vibe to it, and I really don't mind on it. Like I said, it's grown on me. Next, we have Lil Pad. This is, I believe, one of the original songs for this record. And it's got a very nice hum and instrumentation in the background by the members. It kind of starts out with really goofy, like, talking. It almost feels like an outtake for the album, right? It feels like one of these session tapes from the previous albums. And it's got a really strange quality to it, but I think the instrumental kind of saves it for me. It's very catchy. It sticks in your head. And, like this whole album, it's chill. Side 2 has Good Vibrations. Once again, we are immediately, bizarrely, jarred back into a highly produced and highly arranged song, Good Vibrations. It's literally the same one that was released as a single. And, I mean, number one, this is a little bit of a little nitpick, I guess. I don't like the fact that it's at the middle of the track list. I've always preferred the Smile Sessions version where they just threw it at the end. I feel like it's a nice closer. And obviously, I've already said a lot about this song, but Good Vibrations is a really great track. It's iconic. It's one of the top 3 best Beach Boys songs. It's great. It just feels really odd being on this album. Then we have With Me Tonight. This is, I believe, another original song for the album, and I love this song. Carl Wilson does a lot of singing on it, and it's just the chorus, the hook, it's very, very nice. It's got this, of course, this very much lo-fi feel to it, but there's just something about this one that I've always stuck with a lot on this album. It's very chill. It's got some very nice romantic lyrics. It's really good, and I highly recommend it. Then we have Wind Chimes. Wind Chimes is, once again, a song from Smile, but completely re-recorded here. It is just... it's just kind of crazy. I mean, it's like this super lo-fi version of it, and there's some, like, slight singing by the group, and, Wilson and stuff, Brian Wilson, and I am mixed on this version. I hugely prefer the Smile Sessions one. That's why it's a little bit difficult for me to review this album, because I'm a little bit biased towards Smile. But I will say the second half of the song, where I don't know what it is, but there's something about it. The instrumentation, it is just something really soft about it. And it's a very different vibe and chill from the Smile album. So it's got its own strengths and weaknesses. I don't think it's a bad version of it, though. It's really grew on me like this entire album. Getting Hungry, which was released as a single, is, once again, weird. The basic gist of it is, like, you're getting hungry for, I guess, that kind of woman. It's like one of those early love songs, but it's just, I don't know. But it also kind of shows more of their rock, their kind of more hard rock, kind of 60s rock kind of things and vibes that they're going to be doing with their later albums. It's not a horrible track. It's got a nice groove to it, a nice little upbeat instrumentation. It feels like more work was put on this one than compared to the other one. I just find the lyrical content kind of strange. Like it's just the wording of it. Like, I'm going. What was it? Getting hungry for my kind of woman. I don't know, and I'm not trying to laugh, but it's just like I don't know how to feel about this. It's such a strange song on the album. So I'm mixed about it. Wonderful, which is a Smile Sessions track, is put on here. And, Wind Chimes, I'm going to be honest with you, I wasn't a huge fan of it, and I still find it really odd. Wonderful is a little bit better because I feel like the lo-fi version of it works pretty good. It's got some nice vocals from Carl Wilson, and I don't know what it is, but it feels like there's like a group of people showing up for it, or it could be Wind Chimes, but it's, a really nice an interesting lo-fi version of it. So I didn't hate this version of it, but I still prefer the Smile Sessions version. And then we have Whistled In, which is another, I think, original track. And, It's decent. It has a little bit of a whistling tempo throughout the whole track. It could have been something more, but it just sounds unfinished. It only lasts a minute in the entire track list, so it's just kind of crazy. That being said, I do think the wind chime song on this album, I think this is the one that one of them, either Wonderful or Wind Chimes, I think it was Wind Chimes, had the group vocals. I think they got a bunch of children to kind of contribute to the song. Either that one or Wonderful, and their contribution was actually surprisingly pretty good. So I just wanted to mention that. So that's kind of my quick breakdown of this tracks. A lot of Smile tracks here, but also some original tracks. And, to kind of give you my overall opinions, this album, when it came out, was critically panned. People were just entirely confused about it. But it's kind of like one of those cult albums people have looked upon much more fondly. Apparently, if you're on an LSD trip, if you listen, apparently, there's some clinics for, people going through trips and, going through some highs and stuff and recovering. Sometimes, apparently, if you play this album for them, it will be, completely calming, and it works as well as medicine does. So that's kind of insane to me. But for my personal opinions, when I first listened to this album, especially when I listened to Smile and this, I was pretty disappointed. I was like, this is completely so underwhelming. You went from Pet Sounds, which was this hugely complex album, to we're going to record this in our room and we're just going to do a simple version of it. And there was obviously a little bias there, but I've given it a lot of re-listens over the years, and I think I've warmed up to this album a lot more. It's obviously not Smile, and it would never be Smile, even though it features a lot of Smile tracks, but it's got its own strange, weird, but chill quality to it, right? It's kind of got, some very chilled out songs here and there, some decent tracks here and there, and even some of the originals put on this album are honestly really solid. So I think this album, in my frank opinion, is not too bad. I think it's a pretty chill album. It's a little bit underrated in their discography, but albeit it still has a lot of issues. Some of the production is super limited on these tracks, and I wish that there was more added to certain tracks. I don't like Vegetables on this album, period. I way prefer the Smile sessions, and that kind of goes for some of the songs here. Even though songs like Wind Chimes and Wonderful got their own unique quality on this album that I don't mind. But I think that there's just a really nice, chilled out flavor to this album. The original songs, my personal favorite track, if you kind of exclude Good Vibrations, Heroes and Villains, I think gotta be probably With Me Tonight. That's probably the best track. Like I said, if you exclude their singles that were put on this album, I think it's a really great and original track, and I think there's, like I said, Carl Wilson does a fantastic job on it. So overall, it's not a bad album. I think it's a pretty decent to good album. It's got its own unique quality to it, albeit it is a very strange and surreal and weird album. And I guess if you view it certain ways, it's also influential in that lo-fi area, because the Beatles would do something similar with their White Album, and also McCartney in his first solo album. So who knows, maybe Smiley Smile from the Beach Boys was secretly influential to music. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this album. I know it's a pretty long review, but thanks for listening. Hope you all have a good day, and peace, y'all.